Introduction to the Spring Dye of the Soul. An unforgettable journey of young people from the border areas of Shanghai, Sichuan, Hubei, Shandong, Henan, Gansu, Beijing, Hebei, Anhui, Jiangsu, Zhejiang, Shaanxi, and other provinces, holding guns in one hand and Kantoman in the other, at the military reclamation farm on the south bank of the Tarim River. They embark on a life journey of cultivating and defending the border, fighting against the heavens and earth, a golden age for young people, never changing their guard. Chapter 1. Shanghai Youth Entering Xinjiang. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. 1. The train heading west passes through the color gate. The sky suddenly darkened, like a heavy gray-soaked cloth. After a few dazzling red lights flashed in the southeast corner, a rumbling sound came from the sky, as if an unusually fierce artillery battle was taking place, with shells from both sides occasionally colliding and emitting a violent explosion. Immediately after, shoo-la-la, a dense slanted rain curtain hung on the sky, possibly due to the wind. Perhaps due to the iron-blue Gobi Desert being scorched too hot by the sun, a rain curtain slanted over the glass window and shook off the ground. Suddenly, white smoke and steam rose in front of me, like a soft and light mist, drifting in one direction one after another. At this moment, the sky was actually half bright and half dark. In no time, raindrops covered the window, and the outside world became hazy. The sky is getting brighter and brighter. Rain, sometimes heard and rustled, sometimes rustled. The sound of thunder was also faint, as if silk was tearing apart in the distance. In less than half an hour, the sky was completely bright. Only a faint roar could be heard from the distant horizon, like the sound of jet planes passing through clouds. A red, blue, and purple rainbow hangs diagonally between the duck-egg blue sky and the vast iron-gray desert, like a naturally colored giant arch spanning across the sky and earth. Bang 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 bang. A rapid sound of two rows of red iron wheels colliding with the rails echoed through the gray-blue sky and the iron-blue Gobi. A train roaring westward is like a green worm wriggling, leaping over this huge colorful arch and flying towards the endless sky. The thick white smoke emitted is like a lingering fragrance, slowly drifting in the sky and earth behind it. The Gobi is flat and broad, as if its four sides are connected to the sky. Within a radius of several tens of miles, there is no sign of human habitation. Occasionally, a small mud house in a earthy gray color flashed by the railway. At the entrance of the house stood a black-green diamond poplar with a thick wrist, a pile of withered yellow firewood, clothes hanging on it, and 3 or 2 tired, withered tree-like faces of men. The cabin passed by in a flash, still a blue sky and Gobi. The person in the car window can hardly imagine how the people in the cabin live. It is said that the people living here are patrol workers along the railway line. This is mid-June 1964, the midsummer season. At home, the wheat has already been harvested. On the Gobi Desert, there is no summer. There is no flowing water, no yellow crops, no green branches and leaves here. There are no hens walking on the grass, in front and behind houses, let alone villages where chickens and dogs have heard of each other. Here, only clusters of gray-green reeds flicker by, resembling fine reeds, while the young man from Henan across the aisle says it's Gigi grass. There is also a fluffy, clumps of dark green birds' nest-shaped things that grow close to the ground, dry and burnt, showing some signs of life. The fierce wind howled on the wilderness, occasionally rolling up small pieces of gravel and throwing them against the tightly closed car windows, jingling loudly. The 53 express train from Shanghai to WLMQ is traveling at lightning speed on the rough green-gray desert. Lu Zhuiying let out a sigh in her heart and stretched out the hem of her half-old white and broken red cloth clothes. The clothes were a bit short, otherwise her belly would be exposed. She glanced helplessly out of the window and buried her face in the dark green velvet curtains by the window, intending to squint and sleep for a while. 2 thick, waist-length black braids were quietly draped on her back, and one braid on her right touched the light blue old fabric pants. The faded red hair on the braids looked like two sleeping water-red butterflies. Amidst the group of young people wearing grass-green military uniforms in front, there were occasional sounds of shock and amazement. "Mom, the thunder just now was so terrifying." "Where is thunder?" "It's like a shell exploding." "Come quickly, go quickly too." "Take a break, it's sunny again." "Wow, look at the rainbow, the rainbow." "Hey, how fast is it?" "The rainbow is gone." "GA beautiful, GA spectacular rainbow, it's the first time Allah has seen it. Last night when I crossed the Wushao Ridge, I froze Allah. What Lin calls Nongga to be beautiful. Where less? Jiayuguan. 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 Look, Jiayu Pass is here. Where? 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 Where is Jiayuguan? Where can Allah not see it? Gazha Gazha. After passing Jiayuguan, it's Luyuan. Luyuan, just go out of the Heshi corridor and into the Star Gorge. Once you enter the Star Gorge, it's XJ. Allah, fast forward to XJ. Is XJ's first stop at Xinjiang? No, Xinjiang is not a station. The first station of XJ is Weiya, which is a small station. Once Weiya passes by, it will be the largest station in eastern Xinjiang. Hami. Oh my, Hami. Allah's delicious Hami melon. Do you have a bumpy head or a granite head? When it comes to the season, where do you get a cantaloupe? Oh, Nong Naogwa has always been clever, always coming to fill his forehead. No more noise, Jiayuguan, Jiayuguan Great Wall, it's gone. Jiayuguan. Allah still hasn't seen it. Gazha Gazha. Amada, Amada. Waha. I see it. It's like a dragon, big forehead. The chatter ahead, accompanied by screams of surprise, made Lu Zhuiying completely unable to sleep. In a daze, Lu Zhuiying lifted her head. On a fair and slightly plump melon seed face, she had a pair of shiny almond eyes, big and double, with long eyelashes curled up slightly. Her eyes occasionally flashed with sharp and alert light. She wore a patch of blue cloth half the size of a palm on the left shoulder of her old clothes, and two patches of gray cloth half the size of a palm on the knees of her old blue pants. Two chestnut black waist-length braids add a youthful touch to her. The small half of the carriage behind the connection where she was located was chaotic, mixed with urine, sweat, fart, and smoke. The hot and unpleasant smell almost made her lose her breath. Just now, when there was a sudden thunderstorm outside the window, all the glass windows in the entire carriage were lowered. Now, the thunderstorm has passed, and many of the windows in front have been restored. The window frames have been lifted upwards, and the cool breeze with moist rain on the Gobi Desert is whistling in. The reason why the window is not raised halfway up, or simply lifted to the top, is because the wind outside the window is too strong. Only the 4 or 5 rows of windows in the latter half of them are still tightly closed. Various mixed odors naturally refuse to dissipate. She stood up, pressed her right hand on one corner of the window frame on her side, leaned over and reached out to the window of the opposite seat with her left hand to lift the other corner. She tried to lift it up, but the window remained motionless. Even harder, there was still no movement. She looked at Mi Chui next to her, who was black, red, and chubby. She was opening her thick lips, drooling, and sleeping soundly with her eyes closed. In fact, every time I mention the window frame, it's the man from the other side who is in his 30s with a Hunan accent blue cloth Zhongshan suit. Unfortunately, he is now bowing his head and embracing a little boy with a pot lid in his arms, his face flushed, and he is sleeping sweetly, snoring loudly. A skinny woman in her 30s next to him, probably his wife, was lying on the small table and sleeping like a dead pig. From time to time, her saliva dripped onto the little boy's bare buttocks under his blue and white sea-sole shirt. The slightly larger little girl next to the woman was squeezed between two large rooms, with her buttocks only touching a little bit. She was half asleep and half awake, occasionally opening her eyes as if waking up. She looked around with a gurgling sound and then closed her eyes again. Lu Zhuiying had to sit down and give up the plan to open the window. She looked around her and found that the last few rows, dressed as ordinary people like her, were almost all sleeping soundly. Just now, with the loud thunder and rain, these people were still sleeping like dead pigs. She was slightly annoyed and glared at the group of young men and women dressed in grass-green military uniforms and white cloth shirts in the front half of the carriage. That group of people, crying and laughing at once, giggling and laughing wildly, as long as they open their eyes, they never stop. Chapter 1. Shanghai youth entering Xinjiang, 2, laughing and herding cattle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. To laugh and herd cattle. Lu Zhuiying noticed that the group of young people in grass-green military uniforms did not have a red 5-pointed star on their military hats and 2 red square collars on their collars. A woman's hat, without a brim, oval-shaped, buttoned on the head, exudes a strong aura. She took the train from Yangyang and changed trains in Baoji. Shortly after boarding the 53rd train, when she went to open the water and use the restroom, she saw that the young people sitting in the front carriage were also dressed in this kind of clothing. The young man from Henan sitting opposite said, "That's a Shanghai person going to the XJ branch." This train, the other carriages are all Shanghai people, except for the 13th carriage near the luggage compartment, which is also the last carriage next to the luggage compartment, with 20 to 30 ordinary people like them. That group of people are really crazy. At one moment, the sound of nursery rhymes shook the sky, at another moment, whimpering, and at another moment, laughing and roaring. As soon as I passed through Lanzhou, the houses outside the car window became thinner and fewer trees grew. In the group ahead, there began to be women crying and groaning. Yesterday afternoon, after passing through Wuwei and Zhanya, patches of withered yellow sandbags and iron-green Gobi Desert appeared. The man also shed tears, and the girl who spoke like a machine gun even cried out loud. The female leader, estimated to be in her 20s or 60.7 years old, was called Fang Chunxiao. She walked back and forth in the hallway, gently patting the girl's shrugged shoulders and touching her trembling head like a chicken pecking rice. She repeatedly whispered to each other, and the carriage was filled with murmurs and moans. The Green Willow village is in front of the mountain, herding cattle here. Suddenly, a cheerful and loud sound of counting boards drifted from the connection of the front carriage, coming from far to near. The girls stopped twitching and looked up to see a robust man in his 30s, of medium height, with a red and black face and a beard. He jumped into this carriage happily, dancing and dancing. As he spoke, he took small steps and jumped, only to stop in the middle of the aisle. He continued to draw vivid sounds, with a deep voice. Wild flowers are fresh and beautiful, the green grass covers the mountainside, the yellow warbler is chirping on the branch, white geese playing in the water. The weather is good today, drive the ox up the mountain, drive it up. He finally turned sideways and made a lunge with his left leg forward, his right hand pointing forward, and his left hand waving a whip around his head. In the carriage, there was applause. Scaffolding, oh! What a fat scalper! Before the applause came, he let out a loud shout and waved his hands left and right to drive the cow. Where are you running? Let me ride you for 2 steps. I saw him with his hands slanted across his mouth, blowing the illusory flute, his left foot in front and his right foot behind, crossing and standing on the side. With one foot in the air, he kept shifting left and right, swaying forward. His sturdy body was so agile and lightweight, like a ferry riding on waves, with the demeanor of a Bodhidharma crossing a river with a reed. In the carriage, there was a burst of enthusiastic applause and laughter. Chu, why don't you come earlier? Fang Chunxiao, standing in the aisle behind the carriage, looked up and saw him smiling. He immediately shouted as if he had seen a savior's straw. Comrade Fang Chunxiao, have you forgotten again? I said before, you can call me Chui Lu, Lao Chu, or Comrade Chu. Besides, we are actually deputy section chiefs. If you coldly remove the previous sub-character, we would feel embarrassed. Look, you are actually a regular section chief, and we haven't called you Fong section chief either. Otherwise, people would think that this and that section of stock are Comrade Fong, Comrade Yuan. I call you Lao Chu, but you are still 3 months younger than me. Call your name, Fong Chunshao, with a clear eyebrow and a short braid that was shoulder length, smiled happily, paused for a moment, and finally restrained a bit, but still couldn't hide a smile on her face. I'm afraid others might hear you as Chu Yelu, not as you said, maybe not as you said. Shandong is abbreviated as Lu or Lu Sun's Lu. But it's the Sika deer in the wild mountains, the wild deer. It might even sound like a wild road in a la Shanghai dialect. Wild road. Chu Wild Road. A tall and skinny young man with glasses supported his mirror legs and smiled. Wild Sika deer, wild roadster, Yelu, it's really easy to get mixed up. In the carriage, there was another burst of laughter. Whether it's a wild deer or a wild road, anyway, it's like being able to make comrades suck and drink noodle soup one by one, and in the blink of an eye, the dog's eyes will open up one by one. Sacrificing some of my name would be a pleasure, wouldn't it? Chu Yilu blinked solemnly. In the circle of people gathered around, another wave of laughter erupted. Okay, Lao Chu, compared to others, I still think calling you Lao Chu is more pleasing to the ear. Fong Chunshao smiled as a pair of long eyelashes, like small fans, drooped. She lightly brushed a few light brown freckles around her cheekbones and urged, Lao Chu, you sang and danced the small section of the Hebei folk song Little Cowherd from my hometown so well. The atmosphere in our carriage suddenly got up. Why don't you take advantage of the heat and even sing and dance the back section? There's more behind it. Allah didn't watch enough and listen enough. Chu, one more. Chu, come on. The young people's eyes lit up immediately, clapping their hands and shouting. Hey comrades, you don't know, in fact, Comrade Fong Chunshao is the pillar who can sing and dance at the annual Spring Festival Gala of our department. Especially her little cattle herding, it's so sweet and beautiful. Almost every time the department's Spring Festival Gala is a reserved program. Chu, the head of the department, frowned at her and chuckled. Lu Zhuiying was still holding her chin and staring blankly on the coffee table, when she heard the cheering of men and women in front of her. Chu, Fong, come here. Chu, Fong, come here. Chu, Fong, come here. Chu, Fong, come here. You two have a complete little cattle herder. I heard from Fong, there's more behind the little cattle herder. Chu, I didn't hear enough of that little paragraph just now. Come here, 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 come here. Amidst the passionate call of the young people, Chu Yelu and Fong Chunshao stood confidently in the aisle in the middle of the carriage. Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net met each other, 3 meters apart, singing and dancing. Fong Song. In March, peach blossoms bloom, apricot blossoms are white, the rose flowers are red, see the peonies and peonies blooming together again, ha ha ha. Arriving at Qingcaoer Slope, seeing a shepherd boy, wearing a straw hat, wearing a raincoat, holding a flute in hand, riding upside down on the back of a cow, he's blowing a lotus flower in his mouth, hee 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 hee. Shepherd boy. You come here, I ask you, where can I go to Xinghua village? No. Chu Song. Brother Shepherd, speak up, miss, are you listening to? With one finger, south points north, to the east and to the west, after crossing this high slope, how many households are there? There is a big sign hanging on the willow tree, little girl, come here, after that high slope, it's Xinghua village. Ha, hee hee. They, one with a voice as thick as a bell, and the other as clear as a babbling stream. One is mischievous and witty, while the other is cute and charming with a willow-waisted design, portraying the lively and playful interactions, mutual teasing, and hidden emotions between the shepherd boy and the village girl in a vivid and charming manner. Finally, the two of them took a bow and arrow step forward and backward. He raised his left hand and smiled, pointing to the left front, while she closely followed the direction of his smile and put on a neat and beautiful pose. In the carriage, there were cheers, applause, and stomping of feet. I didn't expect that Chu and Fong, both of them, really have two talents. Without two brushes, can you be young and become a stock manager? Hee, the two of them are quite compatible. Chapter 1. Shanghai Youth Entering Xinjiang, 3, Universal Key. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 3 Universal Key, nonsense, the two of them can only be said to be good partners. They can't be called a perfect match. During dinner last night, the head of the other party also said that her eldest daughter can make soy sauce and her youngest son can crawl all over the bed. Well, maybe the son and daughter of Sister Fong are also the son and daughter of Brother Chu. They are just a couple. Also, why are you covering Allah's mouth? Nonggu opens his mouth and talks nonsense. The son and daughter of Sister Fong, surnamed Fong. Ah. To be honest, they're really not the same family, are they? What a pity, they're such a perfect match. What a pity. He's just a good partner, he just likes to play along. That's right, they are definitely from the same family. When we had breakfast the day before yesterday, Allah heard from Chief Chu about his son's mischievous behavior. He often beat and cried other people's little girls in kindergarten, causing him to have to apologize to their parents every day, including Chief Fong. Haha. Lu Zhuiying, like the ordinary people in the back rows, stretched her neck, perked up her ears, and looked and listened with strange interest to the crazy young men and women in the front seat, struggling in poverty. She gazed at the two leaders from afar, especially the unattractive but talkative leader Chu, feeling secretly surprised. Alas, fortunately, the male leader who rushed over from the front carriage, this sturdy man who looked big, rough, and medium-sized, just entered this carriage and in a few minutes, with just a few words, turned the crying in the carriage into bursts of laughter and cheerful chatter. However, this female leader is quite impressive, as if she is at most 5 or 6 years older than herself. Like the male leader, she can speak, sing, and dance, and together with the male leader, she manages more than 300 people in 3 carriages. Ah! Is the length of the bent section even smaller than the length of the square section? Allah thought that the bearded length of the bent section would at least grow 5 or 6 years older than the square section. Someone stuck out their tongue. Keep it down, Gnome just found out. Did you hit a mosquito in your ear just now? They just talked about it, Fong Chunxiao. I found out yesterday. I saw that Mr. Fong is capable, so I couldn't help but quietly ask how old he is. As a result, Mr. Fong said he was only a few months away from turning 29. The two leaders of the grid are young. They are young and have become the leaders of the grid before the age of 30. It's amazing. Chu Yelu listened to the discussions of these young people and humbly turned to them with a smile, saying, "We will be standing at 30 in 5 months. What is it to be a small, 9th grade, sesame mung bean official like a deputy stock chief?" The young people immediately started cooking. Chu Gu, since Allah saw you in Shanghai 5 days ago, you have been happy all day long. I have never seen you with a worried face. Why are you so happy every day? Have you never had any worries or troubles? In life, who doesn't have any difficulties or worries? When I secretly cry and compete behind my back, you just didn't see it. Ha, Lao Chu, if you can cry behind your back, write my words upside down. Huh, Brother Chu, if you really want to make a living, Allah will never speak Shanghai dialect and will only speak your Shandong dialect every day in the future. Hey, Brother Chu, you're not just a little cowherd, you're just a laughing cowherd. With a big smile on your face. Crying and grabbing the sky and earth, it's just an analogy. However, I have encountered many difficulties and troubles, but later on, I found a universal secret and key to overcome various difficulties and troubles. From then on, no matter how big the difficulties are, whenever I think of this universal secret and key, the dark clouds and wind in the sky blow away. Chu Yelu smiled mysteriously. What secret, key? It's still omnipotent. Chief Chu, don't be stingy, contribute quickly. Yeah, that's a great secret weapon. Let's talk about it, so we can overcome our own difficulties as soon as possible. Chu Gu Chang is indeed impressive. In era Shanghai dialect, there are many ways to do it, wild and wild. Quickly pass on and teach you the universal key. The young people became interested, opened their eyes wide, perked up their ears, and stared at Chu Ilu's big mouth. My universal secret, when you say it, you must think it's very simple. But if I don't say it, you can't guess it at the moment. Kaka. He cleared his throat and smiled, comrades, if I say it, don't laugh at me. No joke, no joke. Alright, don't play hard to get. Don't lose Allah's appetite. Chief brother, please satisfy our curiosity quickly. The young people smiled enthusiastically. Okay, to be honest with my comrades, whenever I feel the most difficult and uncomfortable, I think about the Red Army during the Long March and the Volunteer Army during the Korean War. This is the universal secret key that has helped me overcome hundreds of difficulties, big and small, over the years. You all lost hope, right? Oh. Many people exhale. I can't say I'm disappointed, but it seems to be similar to what we heard from our teachers at school. Not disappointed, just no surprises. Bitter or not, think about the Red Army's long march of 25,000. You reading at www.yuukangshu.net is outdated. Chu Gu Chang, what you're saying is just a cliché. What kind of secret key is it? We already knew it. We've heard so much in school that our ears are growing calluses. I already knew about it. Why was there still a sobbing and snoring sound of drinking noodles in this carriage just now? Is it difficult to do what is easy? Chu Ilu blinked his small eyes and smiled at everyone. Everyone, look at me, look at you, and I chuckled softly. Okay, let me show my comrades this universal secret. Is it really 100 trials and tribulations? His black and bright little eyes flashed with a light. I often think, no matter how difficult I am, is it difficult for the Red Army? I am now no longer difficult, no enemy is chasing me behind my buttocks every day, shooting and throwing grenades. I don't have to go barefoot or kick on my bleeding worn-out grass shoes. In the wilderness, the wind whistles with the sound of enemy bullets in my ears, and I run aimlessly. In the carriage, someone chuckled loudly. Comrades, why are you laughing? Chief Chu continued solemnly. At least, I'm not in danger of my life now, I don't have to die. I'm no longer in a difficult situation, I don't have to eat boiled cow leather belts, barley pulled out from horse manure, or wear single clothes on snowy days. Now, with steamed buns and old cotton jackets, at least I can eat and wear warm clothes. How difficult is the long march of the Red Army? No matter how difficult it is, I have been bombed by nationalist planes on my head, surrounded and intercepted by hundreds of thousands of nationalist troops on the ground, eating grass roots and gnawing tree bark. Is it difficult for teachers? Teachers are so difficult, and even leading the Communist Party. Starting from over 1,000 people who started from scratch during the autumn harvest uprising, after less than 28 years of bloody struggle, they defeated 8 million Jiang bandits, overthrew the Jiang family dynasty, and laid the foundation for the Red Army. It's so amazing. Who can compare with him? The young people couldn't help but whisper. Chapter 1. Shanghai youth entering Xinjiang, for how many years can be managed in the first war of anti-US aid to Korea? You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. For how many years can the anti-US aid Korea War last, and, the most powerful, in your Shanghai dialect, the most stubborn is comrades, 16, a whole 16. Chu, the head of the thigh, raised 10 short and chubby fingers above his head with a dignified expression, making a gesture of 16. The volunteer army, in fact, is our people's liberation army. With the wise and bold decision-making of our teachers, and in the infancy of New China, they dared to arm themselves with the armed United Nations army that was armed to the teeth with the old American emperor. They dared to rely on the power of one country, bravely pick the tough 16 tough challenges, causing the American and Western lackeys to look for teeth and have to sit down at the negotiation table. The volunteer army's steel-willed flesh and blood body set rules for Western powers, so that these powers who committed crimes on our territory before 1949, burning, killing, looting, would no longer dare to cross the thunder pool. One step. The young people stared at his mouth, nodding incessantly, their eyes filled with admiration. Comrades, all I need to do is think about these. The vast shadow blocks in my heart disappear immediately. My heart is full of strength, and my whole body is full of energy. Of course, every time I imagine a different scene. Sometimes, I think about the scene of the Red Army first reaching Xinjiang and flying to seize the looting bridge. Sometimes, it's the scene of the volunteer army climbing ice and lying in snow, attacking the White Tiger Regiment, and fighting bloody battles in Shandong. Anyway, it never fails. Comrades, my universal key is well deserved, isn't it? In the carriage, warm applause rang out. Ladies and gentlemen, looking out the window, it is indeed true that the grey and protruding Gobi Desert is everywhere, and the desolate and uninhabited scenery is everywhere. Even if you reach the oasis of the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, where there are water, trees, fields, and homes, it is still far from your hometown of Shanghai. The place you are going to must be more difficult than Shanghai, otherwise, would you still need to support the construction of the border? I want to ask, do you think today is so difficult, with the Red Army's long march drinking horse urine and eating tree bark? Chu, the chief, flashed with a preliminary victory smile in his eyes. No. A neat and sharp voice. No matter how difficult it is for you today, with the volunteer army crawling on ice, lying on snow, frying noodles, and snowing on snow, and having to compete fiercely with enemy planes, cannons, and incendiary bombs, is that so difficult? No, still spoke in unison. Chu, can you tell me when you came to the Xinjiang branch? Why did you come? The medium-sized girl who spoke like a machine gun suddenly shook her head, tilted her head, and shouted. She has a pale complexion and is not particularly beautiful, nor is she too unattractive. Only two things stand out on her face. Her eyes and nose. The eyes are relatively small, and the nose is like a flat path. Of course I can. Well, I came to the Xinjiang border early. As early as 1951. Ah. 1951, so early. You've been supporting it for 13 years. TSK, when you're 15 years old, do you just support yourself? Aren't the Allah Corps only established in 1954? The young people couldn't believe their ears and couldn't stop talking. What is this? Comrade Fang Chunxiao was 2 years earlier than me and entered the Xinjiang border support. Haha. Everyone turned their heads to look at Fang, who was in the aisle opposite Chu. She smiled and nodded, then turned around to look at Chu Yilu, all of whom demanded, Chu, why are you so early and so young? Why don't you just enter the Xinjiang border? Well, it all starts with 1949. Shortly after the thunderous salute of the National Day in 1949, the 2nd and 6th Armies of the 1st Field Army of the People's Liberation Army, led by Commander Wang Zhen, solemnly swore their allegiance in the ancient city of Jiayuguan, Gansu. They marched westward from Yuan Pass and triumphantly entered XJ. After more than 2 months, they planted the 5-star red flag throughout the north and south of the Tian Shan Mountains. Chu Yelu waved his hand with emotion. That's also true. After talking for a while, Chief Chu hasn't mentioned why and how you entered Xinjiang yet. Someone couldn't help but interject. Someone immediately glanced at her and said, just talk nonsense, don't interrupt. Allah is really addicted to listening. Chu Yelu cleared his throat and was full of energy. In 1950, Chairman Mao's Party Central Committee issued a great call to cultivate and defend the border. The troops entering Xinjiang, holding guns in one hand and Kantoman and pickaxes in the other, began a vigorous and self-reliant large-scale production movement. They set up camps in the vast wilderness, started from scratch, lived in their own dug dens, gnawed on steamed buns, ate salt, drank alkaline water, made their own tools, pulled plows, dug water channels, planted trees, and built bridges and roads. In the autumn of 1950, the troops were able to be semi-self-sufficient. In 1951, the troops entering Xinjiang are basically self-sufficient. The troops are really amazing. The People's Liberation Army is really amazing. In just 2 years, I can basically be self-sufficient. It's really amazing. No wonder General Chu entered Xinjiang in 1951, and the troops are now self-sufficient. Hey, Chief Chu, so you joined the army at the age of 15. Has Chief Chu ever served in the People's Liberation Army? The real People's Liberation Army of China. Ah, don't be too arrogant, Chief Chu. Unlike us, there is no red collar badge on the collar and no red 5 stars on the hat. Yeah, the Corps is not the real army, and we are not the real People's Liberation Army either. Sigh, what a pity. The young people couldn't help but gossip, some praising and some sighing. Comrades, don't be discouraged. Although the 359th Brigade was transformed into the Production and Construction Corps in 1954, becoming our current Agricultural 1st Division, there is a qualifier in front of this division. Agriculture, agriculture. Formally, we are no longer real soldiers, but in essence, the goal of our corps establishment. To cultivate and defend the border has always been very clear. Normally, we use the Kantoman pickaxe to cultivate land and cultivate land. Once there is war on the national border, our corps members will pick up their guns at the first time, just like the People's Liberation Army, and rush to the forefront of defending the sacred and inviolable sovereignty and territory of the country. Comrades, you say, our corps can't afford it. Is it great? Chu Yilu smiled, his beard trembling. Amazing, great. It's so great, so amazing. The young people were invigorated upon hearing this. However, a fair-skinned, middle-aged, and spirited young man blurted out, Chu, the question is, since the founding of New China nearly 15 years ago, we have never seen a major war except for the recently established anti-US and aid Korea War. In the past 2 years, there have been only minor frictions on the border with the Soviet Union. If this continues, how can we in the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps plant land for a lifetime? Yeah, without a big war, isn't the significance of our army's border defense not as great, added a tall and thin young man with long legs like a crane. Captain by the way, and that tall and thin young man, your questions, I will sort them out and put them all together into one. What is the significance of our corps in a long-term peace situation? Or, is there any significance? These 2 young men like to think, good things. Is there any significance? Is there any significance? I only need to ask comrades 2 questions, and it is very clear. The great victory of the Korean War, the Chinese People's Volunteer Army's blood, combat effectiveness, and tenacious will have taught Western powers a big lesson, hurt Western powers, and created a peaceful environment for us people for the past 15 years. The question is, will Western powers always be honest? By the way, everyone knows these common sayings. Forget the pain after getting rid of the scar, lead the ghost to run, and the dog cannot change its habit of eating feces. In the carriage, burst into laughter. Alright, now I'm asking the first question. How long can our peaceful environment last? It's been 14 years since the anti-US aid to Korea, and our home is still peaceful. 20 years, in your Shanghai dialect, there's no problem with it. 30 or 50 years. 70 or even 100 years. Our anti-US aid to Korea is powerful, but can it last for 100 years? At that time, could the Western powers possibly have healed their scars and forgotten the pain? Their skin was itchy and loose. Chu Yilu blinked his sparkling little eyes and smiled. Chapter 1. Shanghai youth entering Xinjiang. 5. Xiaomi, also a strategic material. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. 5. Xiaomi is also a strategic material. Young people, look at me, I look at you, and in unison, I don't know. Well, that's great. Comrades are very honest, but they don't know. As for me, to be honest, he deliberately paused and smiled, I don't know either. Ha ha ha, the young people all laughed. Okay, let me ask the second question. What is the military of a country or a nation? Defender. Protector. The military is protecting the country and its people. The military is the great wall that defends the country. The military is the copper wall and iron wall of a country. The people are also the iron walls of the country. The young people were in high spirits, and everyone rushed to answer first. Very good, everyone's answer is very good. Comrades, if you want to hear how I answer this question, please be quiet for now. Chu Yilu's words fell, and the carriage suddenly became quiet. I believe that the military is the armor of a nation, and the People's Liberation Army of China is the strongest and most solid armor to defend the new China, the Chinese people, and the dignity of the Chinese nation. And our XJ Production and Construction Corps, during wartime, is our comrades fighting alongside the People's Liberation Army of China. During peacetime, we are the vanguard of agriculture throughout the country. In the carriage, warm applause rang out. Comrades, don't underestimate us in agriculture. What do you think are strategic materials during war? Aircraft and cannons. Guns, grenades. Bombs, gunpowder. Landmines, Xiaomi, and rifles. Comrades answered well. Especially when that comrade mentioned the addition of rifles to Xiaomi, but rifles are strategic materials. In fact, Xiaomi, like rifles, is also strategic materials. Chu Yilu chuckled. Everyone's eyes were full of doubts. Xiaomi, too. Strategic materials. Xiaomi, of course, is a strategic material. Otherwise, how could the Red Army, 8th Route Army, New 4th Army, and People's Liberation Army gradually defeat the 8 million nationalist army that defeated Chiang Kai-shek? Without Xiaomi, without food, people would starve to death. No matter how many guns and artillery there are, they are useless. Everyone nodded frequently and suddenly realized. So, Hamas is the most important strategic material for our Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps to cultivate crops, produce rice, white bread, and rice, and produce cotton. Especially for the southern bank of Tarim where our comrades will go, the long staple cotton planted there is the top scorer in cotton, much stronger than upland cotton in all aspects, but with lower yields. Moreover, as of now, only a few places in our country, XJ, can produce long staple cotton. Now, everyone knows the significance of our corps' existence. Do you know how big the significance is? If we don't have enough food and clothing, how can our People's Liberation Army fight? How can we defend the country and the people? In the carriage, there was a long and enthusiastic round of applause. Chu, why do you know so much? Someone couldn't help but shout. Chu, what is your educational background? Chu, do you have a high level of education? Chu, are you a college student? My education in agriculture at Kashgar Teachers College is a secret, I cannot tell you, it is necessary. Chu Yilu was serious. In the carriage, there was another burst of laughter. Chu Gu Chang, 7 twists and 8 turns, you haven't said yet, how did you enter Xinjiang yourself? Yeah, Allah is particularly interested in your experience. Chief Chu, speak quickly, that's necessary. When I entered Xinjiang in May 1st, I didn't join the army, but my mother took me to go to my father after receiving my father's letter. My father has been gone for 8 years without hearing from me. My mother immediately took my grandmother with her. My grandfather died the year before last. She took 5 of my brothers and sisters with her. They took a carriage, a ox cart, a sedan chair, and a car all the way to XJ. At that time, there was no train yet. On the way, I stopped and walked for 40.3 days before I touched the Shawozi farm near Aksu where my father was stationed. Alas, when I entered Xinjiang at that time, there was no such spacious, bright and comfortable train to take. On the way, the wind and sand were always intimate with my nose, mouth and ears, haha. Chu Yalu laughed loudly. Chu, you were much more bitter than us back then. Think about the scene when Chu Guchang entered Xinjiang in the past. Don't be too lucky now. Chief Fang, so to speak, you are also like Chief Chu. When you entered Xinjiang, you also went to seek refuge with your father. Someone couldn't help but shout out. No, I entered Xinjiang in 1949 because my mother and I couldn't survive in our hometown anymore. Fang Chuanxiao's expression became solemn. Her voice was deep and powerful. My home is located in Jingxing Mining District, Hebei Province, more than 60 kilometers away from Zhejiang. It is the border of Shaanxi and Hebei provinces, and was once one of the 3 major coal mines in China with production output second only to Fushun and Kailuan coal mines. My grandfather and father both work hard in the coal mine to earn a living by digging coal. In a gas explosion mining accident, my grandfather ran out of gas in the mine on the spot, and my dad, Fang Chuanxiao's eyes moistened and stopped for a moment, her voice sorrowful. My dad's left leg was blown off, his 2 eyeballs were blown off, and his right hand was cut off 3 fingers by a bouncing coal block. When my dad was rescued by his colleagues, my mom took a glance and fainted. My dad, he's just a bloody person with black blood all over his body. Fang Chunxiao lowered her eyes and couldn't continue. Inside the carriage, there was silence. After a moment, the painful voice of Fang Chunxiao rang out again. My father lay in the straw pile on the Kong for 5 days and then left. My mother washes her face with tears every day. Later, my mother said that if it weren't for me, I was too young, less than 3 years old, she would have jumped into the Hutuo River long ago. She and my grandmother, as well as a 13-year-old uncle, rely on cooking, sewing, and repairing for the single workers in the coal mine to earn a mouthful of rare vegetable soup. Unexpectedly, on October 11, 1937, the Japanese invaders occupied the mining area. My grandmother died under the Japanese invaders' bayonets in order to save my mother and me. Fang Chunxiao choked up. Many young women's eyes turned red. Fang Chunxiao wiped her eyes and said, my little uncle was forced down from the coal mine by a bayonet. My mother and I are destined. My mother wiped black pot tobacco on her face, carried me on her back, and took advantage of the darkness to run towards my grandmother's house in Shilapu village, Jingding County. As a result, while still on the way, I followed the advice of the refugees who had escaped from the city of Jingding, saying that Jingding had been occupied by the Japanese 3 days ago, and returning to Jingding now would be like dying. There was no way, my mother carried me on her back and had to follow the refugees in small groups, running along the Zhengtai Railway towards Shaanxi. We dare not appear during the day, hiding in the fields, forests, or shrubs, and only dare to come out at night, running and stopping. Along the way, either stealing a few baogu sticks from someone else's house or digging up a few sweet potatoes and yam eggs, my mother chewed them up and fed them to me. A few days later, my mother and a group of 5 or 6 people ran to Liao County, Shaanxi. That theater troupe was able to take in my mother because she could sing and dance before she got married. The troupe travels the streets and alleys, in the village, at the red and white celebrations of wealthy families, relying on performances to pull flowers and beg for some money, take the flowers. So. Take a message. That painting. What are those two words? What does that mean? People are constantly questioning. Chapter 1. Shanghai Youth Entering Xinjiang, 6, Lahua Yuan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 6 Flower border, Lahua is like holding hands, and flowers are like flowers of flowers and grass. Fong Chunxiao laughed, Lahua is like pulling famine, famine is the famine of famine. Lahua actually existed as early as the Tang dynasty. Jingxing, Hebei had 9 years of drought and years of war, and many ordinary people had to drag their children and women away from their hometowns to escape famine. They walked on the streets singing and begging, which is Lahua. Anhui and Huang are homophones of Jingxing, so they are also called Lahua. Oh! Everyone suddenly realized. Someone laughed and said, the people of Hebei are really talented. Lahua. Huh, you call begging and performing so beautifully. To put it simply, Jingxing Lahua is actually a folk song and dance performance such as Shanbei Yanko and Northeast Arenzuan. When performing Lahua, the actors sing and dance, some holding red and green colored silk fans, some holding round flower umbrellas with tassels, and even beating the whip. Look, the main performance movements of Lahua are as follows. Twisting the shoulders, turning the wrists, twisting the arms, sucking the legs, and flipping the feet. Fong Chunxiao demonstrated in the narrow aisle, her beautiful and somewhat comical performance won a round of applause. Fong Chunxiao proudly glanced at Chu, the head of the troupe, who was not far away wiping sweat from his forehead. He continued to speak passionately. One noon, the troupe was performing the sad and joyful 6 contracts in spring, on the streets of Tongyu village. My mother was holding a green silk fan and singing and dancing with others in the circle. I crouched obediently at the feet of the class leader's grandfather, and around 10 people gathered to watch the performance. Suddenly, a commotion of gongs and drums rang from the other end not far from us. The performance of the theater troupe was hula, and they all ran away in one go. There's no other way, the theater troupe has no choice but to close the stall. Despite the displeasure of the class leader's grandfather, my mother hugged me and ran towards the place where a high red flag was flying. As soon as I left, my mother never looked back. Mom squeezed into the crowd, watching those 20 or so young men and women in gray military uniforms perform. That day, they acted in the anti-Japanese street drama, Put Down Your Whip, what is a live newspaper drama. Live newspapers, they are newspapers for events. These short dramas that are performed on the streets and loved by the people are like flowing newspapers that can quickly reflect the big events that happened at that time. Fong Chunxiao's eyes sparkled with joy and pride. She passionately said that the performance of the young people in gray military uniforms was very successful that day, and the ordinary people who watched the play couldn't bear to part ways for a long time. My mother even went straight to the oldest and bearded man, probably in his 30s. He might be their official and insisted on joining them. Mom said, I can also sing and dance. Speaking, he thrust me into the hand of an aunt with a long round face and short hair, in her 30s, who was bending over and busy tidying up props. My mother later said that she thought she might be similar to those who cook and do odd jobs in the theater troupe. My mother immediately stood still and performed the flower-pulling action with great effort. But the male comrade said awkwardly, Mom's dance is really good, but with such a young child, the army cannot have it. My mother cried anxiously and said, she will take good care of the child and will never hold back the army. If you don't want me, I won't have a chance to survive. My man, my parents-in-law, are all dead. I can see that you are good people, I want to go with you. But the gay man still shook his head, and my mother was about to despair. At this moment, the aunt holding me in her arms, who looked not ugly but had a red and black face and a thick waist, smiled and said, What is your name, this lesbian? My mother said, "My name is Li Yanchun, peach apricot plum, swallow swallow, spring of spring." Auntie said, "Comrade Li Yanchun, you can stay in our regiment and wait until you return to Henan after completing the procedures." My mother can't believe her ears. Does a cook's errand work? She stared into the eyes of the male comrade and asked, "Really? Is what this old lady who cooks and does errand work?" Fong Chunxiao imitated cleverly. Ha! In the carriage, there was a burst of laughter. Fong Chunxiao also smiled and said, "At that time, all the young people in gray military uniforms around my mother also laughed. They were talking nonsense, why doesn't it work?" The male comrade smiled and said, "Comrade Li Yanchun, this is not a woman who cooks and does odd jobs. She is the leader of our regiment, and I have to be under her control." My mother's face turned red and white, and she was stunned for a while before bowing deeply to her aunt and saying, "I'm sorry, Captain. We're so clumsy." Auntie waved her hand and said with a hearty smile, "What can I apologize for? In the revolutionary family, the team leader and the comrades who cook and do odd jobs are just different in terms of division of labor, and the essence is the same and equal. Comrade Li Yanchun, you and your daughter must be starving, right? Comrades, hurry up and collect the props. Later, go to the dilapidated temple where we are stationed, make some buckwheat noodles and halua, and welcome the new comrades." My mother's tears, they were flowing with a swish at that time. From then on, my mother carried me on her back and followed Ding Ling, who raised the red flag and led the Northwest War Service Corps to Shaanxi in October 1937, to trek through the mountains and rivers, traveling through villages and towns in Shaanxi. Ding Ling. Is it the same Ding Ling that Chairman Mao personally wrote a poem for her? Who is like a slender pen? A beautiful and handsome girl with a pair of golden black silk bows tied to her long braid couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised as she interjected. "Oh, Vice Captain Wang, you really understand a lot." "Yes, it's the famous female writer Ding Ling. That aunt who is holding me is the famous female writer Ding Ling." Fong Chunxiao gave the graceful and slightly red-cheeked girl a approving glance, and enthusiastically said, "After Ding Ling's Western War troop arrived in Shaanxi, they used forms such as big drums, fast tempo, double read, cross-talk, and live newspaper dramas that the people enjoyed to convey the great principles of Chairman Mao's Party Central Committee's resistance against Japan and salvation to the people in a simple and easy way. After each performance, the people couldn't bear to part with it. Let's go, Yu reads books." www.yuukangshu.net surrounded them and asked about their short stories and long stories. 9 months later, my mother and I followed the Western War group back to Henan. During a commemorative event of the anti-Japanese war, my mother performed the Hebei folk song, Little Cowherd, on stage, playing the roles of a village girl and a shepherd boy while singing and dancing, winning warm applause from Chairman Mao and the officers and soldiers of the 8th Route Army below. It was that cultural and artistic evening party, where a leader surnamed Fong from the 359th Brigade fell in love with my mother. Ha, I guessed it. It must be your mother marrying Captain Fong from the 359th Brigade. Chief Fong, it goes without saying that you are definitely with your parents, following the 359th Brigade into Xinjiang. Ha, comrades from the big city of Shanghai, their brains are just as bright. Fong Chunxiao smiled happily. Chief Fong, Allah also wants to learn how to pull flowers. Teach us how to pull flowers, anyway, it's also idle. So, in the narrow corridor, a long line of young men and women, 1 meter apart, happily learned to twist their shoulders, wrists, arms, legs, and feet. It's so easy, the carriage finally quieted down. The wheels continued to clang and the car continued to sway like a cradle. A faint blush appeared on the gray-blue western horizon. Lao Chu, was it better in the front 2 carriages just now? Fong Chunxiao quietly took a breath, leaning against the narrow back of a 3-seater on the outside, and supporting the side seat back of a 3-seater on the other end of the aisle with his right hand. He asked Chu Yi, who was 3 meters away, with a rude expression. He leaned against the side seat back of a two-seater, holding his arms and standing diagonally. Several young people stood up and offered their seats, all waving and holding them down. How could it be better? What difference can there be between what we see in the front carriage and what we see in this carriage? Chu, the chief of the train, was serious and frowned slightly, sighing, "Why did so much sky fall?" Chapter 1 Shanghai Youth Entering Xinjiang, 7. A Big Girl Falling from the Sky. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 7. A big girl falls from the sky. At noon, the fragrant beans, stewed meat and rice couldn't stop the dry and wet howling horses' big mouths and small mouths. How could there be so many big girls and 7 fairy maidens falling from the sky? By the way, there's also the beautiful thing of losing Panan. His small eyes smiled like crescent moons. Ha ha ha. In the quiet carriage, there was another burst of laughter, and the atmosphere became fully lively. Huh, Chief Chu, you don't even want to lose pie, money, or gold from the sky. Why do you want to lose the big girl? Just as the laughter subsided, someone shouted. Ha ha ha, Chief Chu, nom nom nom. The girl with a flat nose who spoke like a machine gun pointed at him, her tears still not completely dry, and she laughed until her nose burst into 2 bubbles. 7 fairies, Allah knows. 7 fairies and Dong Yong. What kind of Lin is that Pan? Ah, Nong is ignorant and ignorant. That person surnamed Pan is also an ancient person and a representative of ancient beautiful men. He has never heard of such a sentence. Look like Pan Anhua. Lao Chu, you shouldn't be the deputy director of some labor management stock. So, what kind of stock should I be? Your eloquence, your talent, at least you should be the head of the propaganda and education department. Hee, you kid, you're quite good at stirring up discord. Do you want Fong Chunxiao, the chief of the department, to give me a cold shoulder? You didn't sow discord. You also went to the propaganda and education department, and you teamed up with the head of the department. Isn't it adding to the cake? As for the 2 of you, who will be the leader and who will be the deputy? Let's discuss it ourselves. Oh, revolutionary work positions, who wants to change easily? To take a step back, even if the leaders discover Chu's talent, he is willing to condescend to become a deputy in the propaganda and education department. So, is it possible for Fong's former deputy to do so? The deputy head of the labor and capital stock, who goes to the propaganda and education stock, also known as the deputy head of the propaganda and education stock, is at most called Pingdiao. How can it be called Chu Zun? No, even though they are all stocks, can labor and capital stocks be the same as education stocks? Do you know what labor and capital stocks are for? According to Allah's father, their factory's labor and capital department is the most popular. The labor and capital department specializes in managing personnel transfers, salary promotions, and so on in the factory, and has the most real power. So, which one is bigger, the section chief or the section chief? Generally speaking, it's about growing up in a department, and the top of the stock is the department. Of course, if we don't set up a department in our market and just set up a stock, then the department head is actually the department head. Alas, Chief Fong's deputy, if it's a man, it's okay, if it's a woman, isn't the sky collapsing? Why did the sky collapse? We'll keep the original deputy, won't that be enough? You said it lightly. Didn't Chief Fong say that there were 3 of them in total, and Chief Chu went over? Haha, 4 of them, 3 officials. Youth burst out laughing. Fong Chunxiao also laughed uncontrollably and couldn't catch his breath. It was easy to catch his breath, so he glared at Chuilu and said, "It's all your fault. I asked you a serious question, but it turned out to be a mess. It made me forget what I was supposed to say. If you can't remember it, let's forget it. If you can't remember it, it means it's not that important." Haha. Comrades, everyone calm down. Now, listen to me say a few serious things. Chu, the head of the department, blinked his bright and lively little eyes and smiled. In the front 2 carriages, there were originally a lot of moans and grunts, but after I spent 9 cows and 2 horses fighting through thorns and half a cigarette, Hamas laughed out loud. And there were also little girls like you who fired big guns with noses, finally. Huh, Chief Chu, even though you are 9 cows and 2 tigers, you have to come up with a unique way to say that you are 9 cows and 2 horses. Someone took it seriously. Compared to tigers, horses may not necessarily have less strength. Besides, cows, and horses are more fluent than cows and tigers. Chu Guchang remained serious. I think that tigers are definitely stronger than horses. Otherwise, when Wusong fights tigers, why isn't Wusong fighting horses? Moreover, people don't have to run when they see horses, they are not afraid of horses, which shows that tigers must run. It is certain that tigers are much more powerful than horses. Someone analyzed carefully. People are afraid of tigers because they are afraid that tigers will eat people. Eating meat is a natural instinct of tigers. People are not afraid of horses because they know that horses are honest and tigers, do not eat people, and do not kick people casually. Of course, except for frightened horses. What logic do you have, young man? Who says that the stronger side must have greater strength? Otherwise, how could Wusong, who fights tigers, be willing to accept the powerless Song Jiangguan? Chu, the chief of the stock, chuckled calmly. That's true, but I still think that cows may have stronger strength than horses, because... A young man with a white face and a protruding fingertip on his right ear still felt a bit dissatisfied. Suddenly, the circle of people surrounding Chief Chu began to stir, and a chubby, medium-sized young man pulled left and right from behind, searching for the gap to squeeze into the front. Xiao Jinzhen, Nong, don't get into the corners of a cow and take up Chu's valuable time. Whether Nong cares about the strength of a cow or a horse. Whether it's the cow that kills the horse or the horse that kills the cow. It's better for Chu to care about people's matters first. This chubby white guy with a garlic nose, a short stature, and a bun face squeezed towards Chu's side with a worried expression. As soon as Yu read a book, a large section of his pink gums on a row of snow-white teeth appeared. Chief Chu glanced up and down at him, smiled, and said, "Oh, this comrade, is there anything important?" Chief Chu, when I look at you, it seems like there's nothing in this world that can stump you. Your brain is too clever. I muster up the courage and want to ask you a question. Sigh, I usually don't stutter. What happened today? When I spoke, it was like, Chief Chu, if someone you like doesn't like you, what would you do? Kaibaozi, what kind of forest do Nong like? Ga Kwai, I've only been on the train for over 2 days. The machine gun girl's face was completely clouded. 2 days, it's not short. They fall in love at first sight, and they can fall in love in a second. The tall and thin young man with slender legs like a crane smiled. You two really hate giggling and long feet. They were just about to hear what Chief Chuda said when you interrupted them. A girl with red and black skin and a not ugly appearance shouted. So, inside the carriage, it quieted down and everyone looked expectantly at the big thick mouth of Chu Guchang. This young man asked me, what should I do if the person you like doesn't like you? Chu Ilu grinned, I don't have this kind of situation. My eldest son can even go to the house and expose the tiles. Everyone burst into laughter. The chubby guy frowned and said, Chu, don't joke with me anymore. I'm so worried. Okay, for the sake of you mustering up the courage to say a terrible word in my hometown dialect, I'll tell you now, what should we do? What should we do? He looked around with a mischievous smile on his face, then let's have cold dishes. Allah means, Nong is making a lot of money. As soon as Chu's words were spoken, the carriage was filled with a buzzing sound of laughter. Chapter 1. Shanghai Youth Entering Xinjiang, 8, Little Good Egg. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 8 Xiaohao Egg O. They don't like you, did you make a profit instead? Impossible, right? How did you make a profit? Is what Chief Chu said ironic. It's not about making money, it's about crying. It's about crying and getting rich. It's not cold mixed, it's hot mixed. What's so good about a man crying? At most, he's feeling uncomfortable and making a fortune. However, it's not just about making a fortune. This guy with a bent thigh is so clever. You guys can't pick them up clearly, interrupting and helping others out is making Comrade Kai Cash anxious. A middle-aged man with oily black hair and delicate facial features shouted, and then the carriage became quiet again. Why? Chief Chu, why? Why did I make a lot of money? I'm so worried. The chubby guy took out a blue and white checkered handkerchief with edges from his pocket and wiped the sweat off his forehead. Because if you like others, it means you have gained pleasure and happiness from them, but if others don't like you, it means they haven't received anything from you. You have brought the beautiful feeling of wild deer colliding and slightly intoxicated like rice wine with your bare hands, taking advantage of others' great advantages. Can you be beautiful or not? Can you make a lot of money? Haha, wild deer are colliding wildly. This guy is so overjoyed that it's not worth his life. Truly, with Chu's mouth, even the birds flying in the sky have to fall off. Before Chu Gu could finish his long words, ha ha ha, and wah 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 wah, warm laughter and applause echoed in the hallway. Ah. Oh, thank you. Ha ha. The chubby boy grinned to the base of his ear. Alas, yesterday afternoon, it was fortunate that these two young men and women in their 30s were called leaders by the group of young people. Otherwise, the grunt in this carriage would have lasted for an unknown time. The two team leaders coaxed and advised, saying that once they entered XJ, it would be much better. When they arrived at the oasis, red flowers, green trees, and fields were even more beautiful than in the south, and there were more fruits and vegetables than in the south. Later, the two female leaders with shoulder length and short braids took the lead in singing, shaking their necks, twisting their waist, and dancing. It was easy to calm down those people. Those two leaders, one in front and the other behind, went to the front carriage. Now, these people in this carriage are starting to laugh again. The machine gun girl's red eyes had not yet returned to their original color, and she was already standing happily in her seat, jumping and shouting. Lu Zhuiying lifted her legs and realized that her legs were swollen and numb, unable to move. She carefully moved her ankle and poked the tall and sturdy girl next to her with her arm, saying, Mi Chui, what are they talking about? Who knows what they're talking about? What level did they add? Why didn't I see it? I only saw a bunch of black things on the ground in front of me, like cow dung. Sleepy-eyed Mi Chui yawned and wiped her face with her palm, staring blankly out the window. She stood over Zhuiying by more than a head, with two black, shiny, short, and thick braids that were shoulder-high. She wore an old blue and white floral coat patched with a palm-sized blue cloth on each shoulder, and her face was flushed. On one side, there were many messy marks from sleeping, but Zhuiying was not fair. She frowned again and said, but I'm thinking again. There's not a ghost in this world, not a cow. Where did you get cow dung? Jiayuguan, isn't that right over there? I've seen it back and forth several times. A middle-aged man in a dark blue mountain suit, leaning against the window in a three-person seat across from me, couldn't help but enthusiastically guide. As they followed his hand gesture, Lu Zhuiying couldn't help but blurt out, sigh. Ah. What's the point? A long pile of dirt. A dirt house. That dirt house is not as imposing as the tile house with blue bricks and white walls in Yongxing Commune. Cow dung and cow dung. Where's cow dung and cow dung? Big, I want to see cow dung, I want to see cow dung. The pot-covered head in the arms of the man from Henan across the street, the 4 or 5-year-old boy rubbed his sleepy eyes and became interested. The black and chubby face in the flower was still covered with eye droppings, and the yellow residue of the steamed bun on his mouth had not been wiped off yet. He jumped onto his father's lap, Gulyalu spinning his 2 shiny sparrow-like eyes excitedly. His 2 black and chubby little bare feet kept kicking and kicking, sometimes hitting the body of a 5 or 6-year-old girl with braids in the arms of a middle-aged rural woman next to him. The girl raised a small fist and shook it at him, but he just stuck out his tongue and paused for a moment. In a few seconds, his 2 little feet couldn't stop, and the girl had to stare at him and shake her fist. Meatball, so much more talk than feces. These 2 little hooves just can't stop, don't bully such a sister. His father flicked his son's little brain and poked his head outside the window for a while before laughing. Where did cow dung and cow dung come from? So, isn't that? Mi Chui enthusiastically leaned over the small table and almost knocked over the water in an enamel cup, pointing to the clumps, piles, or clusters of dark green fluffy bird's nest-shaped bowls and small wash-basins that occasionally flashed by on the distant Gobi Desert. Huh, what kind of eyes are you looking at? That bunch of black things, not cow dung. That's a bunch of camel thorns, a kind of wild grass that camels specifically eat. Camel thorns, grass. Look at them, black and dry, there's no trace of green grass. Mi Chui spat out her tongue and smiled. Big, I think it's just shit, it's just shit. It doesn't look like grass at all. Meat Egg exclaimed excitedly. Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net, well, a little rascal, talk more than shit. Oh. Big, I know. Look ahead, the sky is more than feces, the mountains are more than feces, and the ground is more than feces. There are more dirt than feces. There are more stones than feces. In our train, there are more people than feces. Meatball patted her little hands and sang happily in her father's arms. The people in both rows of seats were laughing uncontrollably. His father awkwardly patted his son's little brain and said, "You stinky bastard, you know how to compare and draw inferences." In the carriage, there was a burst of laughter. This shit, that shit, this shit. Children can't have their mouths full of shit, otherwise the eagle will catch you up in the sky like a chicken. A girl with short hair in the front row couldn't stand it anymore. She was the one who spoke like a machine gun. She was originally kneeling in her seat and bowing down to look out the window. Upon hearing this, she slipped out of her seat and ran into the aisle of the row of the little boys, bending down to point at the little boy, nuzzling her mouth, and grabbing her hands in mid-air, pretending to be scary. What a lie. When many small stones hit the window just now, I was scared to death. I said the glass window was so sturdy that an eagle couldn't fly in. Meatball looked at the glass window, sniffing and smiling as he tilted his head to look at her. In the carriage, there was a burst of laughter. A small stone cannot break through the glass window, and a big eagle has great strength. It suddenly hits a big hole in the glass window and flies in, catching you with a whoosh and flying up into the sky, scaring you to death. She didn't stop, gesturing seriously. What a lie. I've told you before about an eagle holding a chick and a rabbit, and I'm much bigger than a chick and a rabbit. The eagle's mouth is so small, how can it pretend to be so big? How can the eagle lie down with me in its mouth? Meatball gestured earnestly. In the carriage, it suddenly quieted down, and the young people turned around to look over here, holding their breath. Chapter 1. Shanghai youth entering Xinjiang, 9, leaving Jiayuguan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 9 leaving Jiayu Pass. You didn't tell you that even eagles can catch people, did you? Eagles are so powerful that you don't have to lie in their mouths. They can take your clothes and fly into the sky. My milk once said that a fairy grandfather rode a little donkey up to the sky to play. If an eagle carried me to the sky, I would hug its neck and stand up in the sky, riding a big horse. Stand up, riding an eagle. I rode an eagle in the sky. It's just as fun as riding a fat pig in my milk house. When an eagle is thirsty, I give it urine to drink. When an eagle is hungry, I poop it to eat. Oh, it's so fun. In the sky, everything is more than feces. Clouds are more than feces, stars are more than feces, birds are more than feces, and the wind is more than feces. There is more feces, rain is more than feces, lightning is more than feces, snow is more than feces, hail is more than. The shiny black eyes of the meaty egg smiled like crescent moon, and the chubby little face smiled like a flower. In the carriage, it's hilarious. Was father gave him a big kiss on his little face. You, little red guy, with your mouth full of feces and dirty words, it's hopeless. She sweated profusely, blushed, forced a smile, shook her head, and poked his forehead with a finger, still a little unwilling to give up. Hey, auntie, why don't you defecate? I feel uncomfortable holding back all day without defecating. The laughter wave that descended suddenly rose again. Little rascal, you're so uncivilized. Let me discipline you for your dad. You're so big, you're still naked, you're not shy. Her face blushed, and she lightly flicked her right index finger on Meatball's forehead, scraping his chubby little face. Auntie, I'm not a little bad guy, I'm a little good guy. As I said before, the little doll has iron buttocks for 3 years, and is not afraid of cold in winter, but afraid of hot in summer. Auntie, when I grew up to your age, I definitely didn't have bare buttocks. Ah, auntie, your clothes are wet, and you can see the baby buns. Meatball rubbed his forehead with his left hand, glanced at his father, and saw that his father was wiping the tears he laughed at with his rough palm, without any intention of blaming himself. So, he smiled and pointed his right hand at her chest under her grass-green military uniform, which was highlighted by sweat stains near her armpit, and smiled. Outline. Milk buns. Lu Zhuiying smiled silently. This was the first time she had heard such a name. Milk buns. What is milk buns? Someone kept wiping their eyes and whispered with a smile. Little meaty egg, what is a steamed bun? That's it, milk buns, milk buns. My grandmother said it. I grew up eating my mother's milk buns. This aunt's milk buns are not as big as my mother's milk buns. Meatball pointed at the machine gun girl's chest and exclaimed proudly. Little red boy, little rascal, rough, rough, and wild fork. The machine gun girl reluctantly dropped a sentence, her face turning red and white, and in a burst of laughter, she fled in despair and returned to her seat, turning her face outside the window. The happy little meaty egg was in his father's arms, and finally, the chicken began pecking at the rice again. In the carriage, it's easy to calm down. Shit, shit, shit. That little rascal with a mouth full of shit, it's from you. TSK, TSK, I can't stand you. You call the Great Wall a pile of dirt, and the grass a pile of cow dung. If your eyes are not good, forget it. The key is that you know, that's the Great Wall. The Great Wall started from there. The machine gun girl, thinking of that little rascal who caused herself to be laughed at by a carriage of people just now, was angry and didn't know where to hit. So, she turned around and looked at the 2 rustic country girls in the back row of the aisle, disdainfully shouting. Huh, you can't help but gnaw on planing wood with green bars. A 4 or 5-year-old baby can't handle it. Who asked you to provoke others? Think they're small and easy to bully. The Great Wall. What's so remarkable about these piles of earth made Great Wall? Lu Zhuiying sneered. Who bullied that little red guy? I'm just going to help educate him. Of course the Great Wall is amazing. It was built by Emperor Qin Shi Huang to resist the invasion of the Xiongnu. The machine gun girl was so excited that her small braid on the right ear trembled like a brush. They don't have adults. They want you to educate them well, right? You're a mess. This kind of short and bumpy pile of dirt can withstand their invasion. Shit. Oh, no, don't clear your forehead. It used to be able to withstand it. Hello, Shouty, why don't you say a few more words? Hurry up, you can't see in the blink of an eye. The girl with a long braid facing against the glass window called out without looking back. 2 black silk ribbons were tied to the 2 shiny black braids, like 2 black butterflies, quietly lying on the ends of the braids. Machine gun girl, it seems she's called a little brother. Shouty or Shouty. She just turned around and continued to look out the window. The western sky outside the window is a golden red. Under the vast expanse of dusk, on the desolate Gobi Desert, in the solemn evening breeze, lies a long, earthy yellow dragon with no head or tail, and an ancient building with weathered earthy yellow eaves rides on top of the dragon. Chulong and Gulu were quickly left far behind by the train, forming a dirt yellow line between the sky and the Gobi. Beautiful. Spectacular. The girl with a long braid tied in a black bow still looked at the Gobi Desert in the sunset with reluctance, murmuring. Across from Lu Zhuying diagonally, a middle-aged man with a half-bald head sat by the window, touching his shiny forehead. He smiled and shook his head, whispering to himself in a low voice, "These Shanghai people are really interesting. They sing and cry all the way, and their 2 noses fire cannons. Laughing now, they won't be able to cry yet." "Why?" the 2 rural maids asked in unison. "Why?" Old XJ people all know these few phrases, called. After passing Jiayuguan, 2 tears do not dry, ahead is the Gobi Desert, behind is a wasteland. In one sentence, XJ is suffering. Lu Zhuiying lowered her head and remained silent. XJ is so bitter, what are you going to do? The girl with a black bow and a long braid turned around curiously and asked, with a fresh and refined melon seed face. A few years ago, people said that XJ is a big place and a good living person. XJ is bitter, but as long as he gives up his strength, he can eat enough. Last year, he ran to XJ and found that there is no way to enter the city. Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net is just a key member of the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, which is really better than staying in his hometown and starving. Well, now that he has returned to his hometown, he has taken his wife and children to the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps. After that, he played with a few yellow-haired brains of a 2 or 3-year-old boy in his arms. The skinny rural woman next to him smiled uneasily and hugged 2 5- or 6-year-old girls in patched floral clothes. Their family of 5 squeezed the young man in his 20s, who was in his early 20s and had a catchy ear, with only half of his butt pressed against the green leather chair. "Oh, I remember, it seems like you got on the train at a stop in front of Lanzhou." The girl with a long braid smiled, her beautiful big eyes shining with sincerity. "Yes, Ijia, it's from Dingxi." "How is the Corps?" "It's tough," the girl with a long braid asked cautiously. "Corps, of course it's tough. There's nothing that's not tough about farming. Fortunately, my family is already farming. Why don't you know that going to XJ requires farming? Going to XJ requires hardship. XJ is tough, of course we know. Look, when I was at home in Shanghai, I received an admission letter." The robust girl with a red and black skin, straight features, and red hair tied in 2 shoulder-length black and shiny short braids, swayed a pink piece of paper and ran down the hallway, reciting loudly. "Comrade He Tian Tian. You are honored to be approved to participate in the production and construction of the XJ Military Region Production and Construction Corps. I hope that after you go to XJ, under the leadership of the party, you will hold high the great red flag of Mao Zedong thought, highlight politics, work hard to learn Chairman Mao's works, actively work hard, and train yourself into a new type of worker with both cultural knowledge and political consciousness, contributing all your strength to the construction and defense of our motherland's borders. Signature. Working Group of the Production and Construction Corps of the XJ Military Region of the People's Liberation Army of China on April 25, 1964, then came the Big Red Seal of the Corps. Chapter 1. Shanghai Youth Entering Xinjiang, 10, Same Spring. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. 10 Tongchun, the sandbags and Gobi Desert in XJ are more than those in our Gansu province, but it would be great if we enter the oasis. There are many trees, fields, and people on the oasis, and XJ's fields are much larger than what we have in our mouths. It's hard to see the edges at a glance, not like the palm-sized, meandering, and stingy fields in our hometown. These fields on the oasis were created by Wangjin soldiers on the wasteland and on the sandbags. The Dingxi man spat his saliva. The young man with a windy ear carefully pulled half of his dangling buttocks wrapped in old grass-green military pants and leaned slightly against the green leather chair. With this leaning, his whole body was pressed against the little boy's father, and he quickly dodged a crack. The young man took out a half-old army yellow backpack from his knee and took out a half-pulled yellow baogu cake. While gnawing on it, he smiled and said, "Compared to Shanghai, the current core farm is a bit more bitter, but not the most. The most bitter is the group of demobilized soldiers under Wang Jin more than a decade ago who plowed the land in the big sandbags of the Gobi Desert. They were all carried by people. Now, we have Dongfanghong tractors for plowing the land and cedars for sowing. Besides, although we also farm, at least we earn wages and eat more than we do in our hometown of Jiaozuo's rural production team. When it's time, it's much stronger. At least the baogu bun is sticky, and even if it's done, it's not bad." Feng Feng's ear excitedly raised the golden baogu bun, rubbing the back of his hand against his sweaty forehead. "Especially, in autumn, melon, watermelon, apple, pear and grape are eaten every day. I eat more fruits in XJ one day than I have eaten together in my hometown for 17 years. No, this time I went back to my hometown after visiting relatives. My 2 younger brothers and 1 elder sister came out with me, and there was only 1 old sister and parents left in my hometown, and we all went to the 2nd Division of Korla Agriculture." The young man was so excited that he turned his head to a few rustic young men and women diagonally opposite his back row and nodded his chin. "We are different from you. The more difficult the place is, the more we need to go. We are going to support XJ and build XJ. Mei, Nong is right." Tian turned back to the girl with long braids. "Of course, we know the hardships of XJ. We're not going to XJ for pleasure, we're going to build XJ." The long-braided girl's pleasant voice was filled with pride, with a cinnabar seed the size of a mung bean in the lower left corner of her chin, like a beautiful drop of ruby. "Getting a salary and eating well. We're not like you. Our selfish and supportive goal in building the border is not pure." "Ah." Long-legged, Nong plays the harmonica for Allah, and Captain Bai leads the singing. "Let's sing the song that Leader Fong taught yesterday morning and go to the countryside to the border." Xiao Di stood up and shouted to the young men in front. "Okay." A few young men gathered to play poker and raised their heads. "Go to the countryside, go to the border, go to the place where our motherland needs it the most. Go to the countryside, go to the border, go to the most difficult place of the revolution. My motherland, nurtured our motherland, we need to use our hands to build you stronger and more prosperous." A youthful and heroic chorus of male and female students, mixed with the sound of accordion, flute, and harmonica, echoed in the carriage. "Well, they are quite different from us." Lu Zhuiying thought to herself. Same youth, different origins, different circumstances. When she easily squeezed onto the Shanghai WLMQ train from Baoji Station, she realized this. Almost all the carriages of the train were young men and women wearing grass-green military uniforms and hats. A few people still have glasses on their nose bridges, both men and women, as if they are very knowledgeable. Previously, she had only seen an accountant in the courtyard of the commune, as well as an accountant in a shop selling meat, rice, and tea in Suining County, some of whom wore glasses. According to Jiao's catchy ear, these Shanghai people are students who have just left school and voluntarily went to the XJ branch. It was the local government who beat drums and put them on the train wearing red clothes. They drove and ate all the way without paying. They are mantou, rice porridge and pickles in the morning. Sometimes, each person is also given a few cookies. For lunch and dinner, we cover the rice with water. Lu Zhuiying is so big, it's his first time taking a train, and it's also the first time he has learned from these Shanghai people what it's called, pouring rice. Alas, the so-called lid-watering rice refers to stacking stir-fried vegetables on top of the rice. She thought it was some kind of amazing rice. They ate at home in Sichuan, and the rice was a dish, a bowl, or a plate. They Shanghai people create a new term by pouring dishes from bowls or plates onto rice. Shanghai people, can really make trouble. Every time it was lunch and dinner, she would sneak away with a slanted eye, and the train conductor's car would push over small, silver square iron boxes piled up like mountains. Later, she learned from their Dragon Gate formation that it was not made of iron sheet, it was made of aluminum. She doesn't know what aluminum is, anyway, it's not made of wood. Cover the rice and serve it in silver white aluminum lunch boxes the size of bricks. Those Shanghai people, each person has a box of rice to cover and water for each meal. The boxes were full of lidded rice, sometimes emitting the fragrance of roasted eggplant, sometimes spreading the fragrance of tomato and scrambled eggs, and sometimes emitting a fragrance that she couldn't guess what kind of vegetable it was. No wonder they are so happy. Along the way, apart from eating, sleeping, and using the restroom, these people hardly have any free time in their mouths. It's either a collective choir, or a chattering sea and sky, or the deafening sound of pidden, lao ke. She was so envious of them, but couldn't be happy. She is prepared to endure hardship. After passing through Lanzhou, it became increasingly clear that the sky was vast and the people were sparse. After the Heshi corridor, entering the Shule River basin, the Gobi Desert becomes even more vast, and there is not a single place of people to be seen by car for half a day. The further she went westward, the deeper her heart sank. Gansu hasn't finished yet, it's already like this. XJ, not to mention that. The desolation in the northwest further aroused her longing for her hometown. Her home is on a flat dam in the suburbs of Suining County, Sichuan Province, the land of abundance. It takes half a day by sedan chair to reach Chongqing, and only half a day to reach Chengdu. The green bamboo shoots, the light yellow straw houses, the rustling sugarcane forests, the rows of tender green pea seedlings, the white mist swirling between the old orange tree tops, the sound of the wind box rising and falling in the stove room. All of these made her intoxicated. However, the crazy laughter mixed with Dad's self-talk, the worried expression on Mom's face, the tired figure of Big Brother barefoot bowing his back to pull a boat on the pebbly bank of Shaoqing River outside Suining City, Little Brother's small yellow-skinned face, the pitiful average land of the fifth squad, and the red sweet potato porridge that can be seen in person. All of these made her so sad. My mother often nags in her ear, if only you were a child, it would be great, but you're just a little girl. Sigh. Sisters, what's going on? Her eyes couldn't open. At dusk, the color of the sky is divided into 4 levels. With the distant clusters of camel thorns in the east and west, and the horizon level with the Gobi Desert, it is a broad curved dark blue, ascending in order is lemon color, duck egg green, and the mid-sky is a clear, deep and mellow azure. This is the credit of the sun, but we cannot see its shadow. Unconsciously, the outside of the window turned pitch black. The rectangular ceiling lights in the carriage were on, dim and yellow. Someone has already fallen asleep, either lying or leaning on the ground, covered with clothes. Some people are chattering and eating, while others lower their voices and mutter something. The fragrance of rice and beans wafts in the air. Lu Zhuiying's dinner is very simple. As the Shanghai people chatted and laughed while eating snow-white rice and fragrant sliced meat stir-fried with beans, she forcefully suppressed her saliva. She filled her stomach with 2 handfuls of raw beans, 1 handfuls of raw peanuts, and half a jar of boiling water. Mi Chui was the same, eating corn cakes brought out from her own home. She was so dry that her teeth almost bounced off. She generously stuffed her corn cakes into her hand, and after tasting a small piece, she stopped eating them. But it was her raw peanuts and green beans that Mi Chui didn't eat much.